It's 3 a.m. and your children are safe and asleep. But there's an Android phone in the White House, and it's blowing up. Something is happening in the world, or on TV, or on Twitter. Your vote will decide who does the subtweeting. Whether it's someone who already knows the world's beauty pageant winners, knows the ratings on the fake online polls, someone with insomnia and ready to react to any bait whatsoever. It's 3 a.m. and your children are safe and asleep. Who do you want tweeting?
Baby, baby, please let me hold him. I want to make him stay up all night. Yeah, we do, in the words of the immortal Talking Heads. Welcome to the latest edition of the Pre-Dawn Dawn. After Monday's debate, Donald Trump's campaign has been trying to swat down stories about dysfunction within the ranks while also cleaning up after Trump's fat-shaming of Alicia Machado. So what's a presidential candidate to do when he's up in the middle of the night thinking about the state of his campaign? As is his wont, Trump turned to Twitter. He first informed us of his insomnia at 3:20 a.m. Eastern Time when he tweeted, quote, "Anytime you see a story about me or my campaign saying sources said, do not believe it. There are no sources. They are just made up lies." Trump then either fell asleep or got distracted somehow, God knows how, because the next thing we know, it was 5:14 a.m. and Trump started a new round of attacks on Machado. Quote, "Wow, crooked Hillary was duped and used by my worst Miss You. Hillary floated her as an angel without checking her past, which is terrible." 5 minutes later came another tweet. Quote, "Using Alicia M. in the debate as a paragon of virtue just shows that crooked Hillary suffers from bad judgment. Hillary was set up by a con." Yes, he spelled judgment wrong, but that's not quite the point.
But wait, there's more. It gets better. Or worse, at 5:30 a.m. came this tweet, quote, "Did crooked Hillary help disgusting checkout sex tape and past Alicia M. become a U.S. citizen so she could use her in the debate?" Today, Machado responded with a post in Spanish on Instagram that called Trump's attacks on women frightening. The Clinton campaign says Clinton called Machado today and thanked her for standing up to this. Trump this afternoon at a stop in Coral Springs, Florida, Clinton released the sentiment and addressed the tweeting spree.
I mean, really, who gets up at 3 o'clock in the morning to engage in a Twitter attack against a former Miss Universe? Really, why does he do things like that? I mean, his latest Twitter meltdown is unhinged, even for him. It proves yet again that he is temperamentally unfit to be president and commander-in-chief.
Late this afternoon, Trump followed up with a final defensive tweet, quote, "For those few people knocking me for tweeting at 3 o'clock in the morning, at least you know I will be there, awake, to answer the call." Donald J. Trump, WTF.
I like the idea that, first the tweet, that defensive tweet where he says, "For the few people who think this was a mistake on my part." We are asked constantly to try to psychoanalyze Donald Trump, and sometimes it's kind of easy and sometimes it's kind of hard. This is one of those days where you think to yourself, I just can't imagine, I can't fathom what is going on inside that man's head to cause him to do what he did last night or early this morning. There is no plausible, explicable reason. There's no interest of his that's advanced. There's no way in which it gets him closer to the White House. And in fact, he is on a story that, like a fire, was starting to slightly again by doing this thing.
I am a member of the Late Night Lucky Trump tweet club.
Yeah.
About 5 or 6 weeks ago, 10 o'clock on a Sunday night, just out of nowhere comes this tweet. Donnie Deutsch, you're a loser, you eat pond dirt, whatever. It was a typical Trump kind of thing. And I remember saying to myself, wait a second, it's 10 o'clock on a Sunday night. This is what this guy is doing. And obviously we saw the tweets here. Here's the thing we have to start to do, because we could go on and on and on how reprehensible, ridiculous, frightening it is. We need to start to overlay this as if it's 3 months from now, and it's January 22nd. Right. And the behavior, think about this. He's president of the United States, and what's going to happen starting in the morning with a morning briefing book that he's not capable of reading because he can't focus. And if at some point Putin during the day says, Trump, you're a little man, I mean, where do we go from here? So we have to start now overlaying, go, this is no longer funny. This is frightening to think that this man is potentially a president. It's reprehensible, it's vulgar, and it shows both not only temperamental issue, but stupidity. Stupidity. I have to use that word, stupidity.
Yeah. It's worth, I mean, it is worth saying. First time we've ever had a presidential nominee invoking a sex tape. Secondly, there is no sex tape. Right. It's all made up, right? So the thing about this is that if you were sitting in the Trump campaign right now and you've been thinking about the debate fallout, first of all, he had a bad debate. Second, he made it worse by attacking Machado. Third, he's made it now infinitely worse by attacking her again at the end of the week. You now are looking at a debate in 8 or 9 days where you've got to try to get Donald Trump to perform better. And your candidate, rather than saying to you, as Barack Obama said to his people back in 2012 when he lost the first debate, I get it, I lost, how do I get better? Yeah. Donald Trump believes he won the debate and believes that somehow doing these things are appropriate and somehow furthering his cause. If you were working for Donald Trump right now, you'd be like, we are doomed. We are doomed.
I know we're not here to talk about the upcoming debate, but he is so set up to fail there because you know he's going to come at her with all the guns blazing, and that's going to backfire. That's why he didn't do it the first time, and it's going to be frightening.
Read your prompter, Donnie.
Okay. Donald Trump has been telling... Love when you get stronger. He's been telling voters to follow the money. He is, of course, talking about Hillary Clinton, but that phrase works both ways. Dude. 2 stories out late this week yet again suggest there has been some financial jiggery-pokery going on in Trump world. One is by dogged Washington Post reporter David Farrenhold, who has a new piece claiming the Trump Foundation never obtained the proper certification required the state of New York for charities to solicit money from the public. Another story by Newsweek says Trump's business secretly conducted dealings with Cuba in violation of the U.S. embargo, a claim Trump disputed yesterday in an interview with the local Granite State station NH1.
I never did business in Cuba. I heard this guy who has a very bad reputation as a reporter. You see what his record is. He wrote something about me in Cuba. No, I never did anything in Cuba. I never did a deal in Cuba.
Also today, a D.C. judge released video of a Trump deposition from June that was tied to lawsuits over prominent chefs who, offended by Trump's comments about Mexicans being rapists, backed out of plans to open restaurants at his new hotel. Okay, John, to what extent do these stories fly in the face, handicap his whole follow the money Hillary Clinton bravado?
Well, let's be clear. First, the first thing that's keeping the follow the money corruption argument that Trump is making from breaking through is Trump's behavior in the Alicia Machado and on other fronts. The fact that he keeps getting in his own way of his message. But of course, there's been so much focus on the Clinton Foundation and Hillary Clinton's email. All of it, I think, much of it, most of it, totally appropriate. But it's so out of proportion to what we see in the Trump Foundation. We see with Trump University. We see that there are infinitely, not infinitely more, but there are just as many, if not more, and potentially more instances of obvious corruption, illegality, and so on Trump's part. And we're finally at the place in the campaign where some really good reporters like David Farrenhold and Kurt Eichenwald, the reporter that Trump trashed at Newsweek about the Cuba story, are training their focus on Trump. And those things are starting to get traction and make it harder for Donald Trump to make his arguments.
Believe it or not, this was actually good news for Donald Trump because Trump has 2 underpinnings of deficiencies, sleaze and hatred. Right. The hatred sticks. The sleaze, we've seen Trump University. We've seen the story about the Trump Foundation where he literally took money out, charitable money, and literally put it in his pocket by paying for legal fees. And to your point, the Hillary thing is a different thing. The line is nowhere in the same place. But somehow people let that, oh yeah, he's a businessman, that's what he does. Even the zero taxes thing, oh yeah, he's smart. The stuff that sticks, and this is why I think today this is good for Trump because we're off what we were just talking about, is the disabled reporter, is the cons, is of course the Machado story where it is this vulgar, unempathetic, disgusting, reprehensible behavior towards the little guy. That's what sticks. This stuff doesn't stick.
Well, yes. Well, certainly the things where Trump is taking on private citizens, as the ones that you mentioned, those are the ones that are most salient. There's no doubt that those are the things that cause him the most political problem. But I will say that as he does things like he did in the debate where he says things like, well, that's just business, and it's great if I didn't pay taxes, it does make him seem more like a plutocrat, and in that sense, not going to help him out with his white working class base. Up next, what the polling tells us about the debate and its effect on the presidential race. We'll be right back with that.
As this week ends, we've seen a flurry of polls that have been shaping perceptions about the presidential race. CNN, ORC, and NBC News Survey Monkey named Hillary Clinton the clear winner of the first presidential debate by more than 30 percentage points. And already there are some new state polls out that suggest Clinton might be seeing rewards from that debate stage victory. In Florida, Mason-Dixon poll has Clinton leading Trump by 4 points, 46 to 42% among likely voters. In a four-way race, that's up 2 points from the same poll last month. In Nevada, Suffolk University has Clinton beating Trump 44 to 38% in a three-way contest among likely voters. That's a 4-point gain from the same survey last month. In New Hampshire, Clinton is up by 7 points among likely voters in a WBUR poll, 42 to 35%. That margin is 4 points smaller than it was in this poll the past month, but higher than other Granite State polling we've seen in recent weeks. And in Detroit news, Michigan poll, Clinton leads Trump by 7 points. Okay, John, we're seeing some conflicting polls. Where do we see this race right now?
No, I don't think the polls are conflicting all that much. I think if you think about the polls, these polls that have been taken in this time since the debate has happened, you're seeing Hillary Clinton leading in all 4 of those battleground states. Michigan and New Hampshire are states where she is strong and she will likely win. Nevada is a state where she has been behind, worrying a lot of people in the Clinton world. And in Florida, it's been neck and neck. She's seen a little bit of an uptick. I think we're going to see national polls that come out in the next few days that have her up, having moved up 2 or 3 points strictly because of this debate. And she now has the psychological advantage, the confidence she has from having won that debate and seeing all this empirical evidence moving in the right direction and seeing how Donald Trump is reacting, like behaving like a lunatic.
This is interesting. And she had the polls have moved overall 2 points already. And these polls do not take into account the last 3 days.
Yes.
This is where the real damage was done. Obviously, it was a moment on stage the next day, but the real brouhaha has happened, and that's not in these polls. I think you're going to continue to see this lead widen, and I think you're starting to see, and I've said this all along, when Trump genuinely is going to feel like he's losing, and I really do feel like it's getting away from him at this point. I think these things, you can't unwind these things in a matter of a few weeks, and I think there'll be more of this nasty stuff of Trump to come out that's going to make it worse. You know, Hillary Clinton's been vetted for 30 years by Republicans. I wouldn't be surprised at the next debate we don't find out about the next Machado. So I think this is the beginning of the end for Trump.
Right, I mean, think about, you came into that first debate with a lot of pressure on Hillary Clinton. The polls were tightening in Donald Trump's favor. Some polls had it in certain states he seemed to be moving ahead. Democrats are sort of freaking out. A lot of pressure on Hillary Clinton because, of course, many Democrats think if Trump became president, it would be the apocalypse, right? She wins the debate, and Trump unravels, as you said, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and especially this morning, Friday morning, he has just unraveled. And you're right. The damage he's doing to himself with key constituency groups, and especially those college-educated white women who are kind of Republican-leaning normally, who are looking at this and going, I don't want any part of that anymore. All right. Hillary Clinton tried to summon her inner JFK and her inner WJC today in Fort Pierce, Florida, where she unveiled a new plan to inspire more careers in public service across the country. The plan included proposals to triple the size of AmeriCorps and expand opportunities for older volunteers while doubling college scholarships that people can earn through public service, as well as loan forgiveness for people who go into public service careers. Clinton also said she wanted to grow the Peace Corps and create a part-time National Service Reserve modeled after the Armed Forces Reserve.
I talk a lot about how America is an exceptional nation. We're not exceptional just because of the size of our military or the size of our economy. We're exceptional because of the generosity and ingenuity of our people.
39 days left. This is the choice. Do we lift each other up or do we tear each other down?
Clinton also called AmeriCorps one of her husband's proudest achievements as president in that speech, which echoed a key element of Bill Clinton's new Democratic movement from 1992. Remember this nomination speech?
You must do your part. You must pay it back. From your paychecks, or better yet, by going back home and serving your communities. Just think of it. Think of it. Millions of energetic young men and women serving their country by policing the streets, or teaching the children, or caring for the sick, or working with the elderly and people with disabilities, or helping young people to stay off drugs and out of gangs, giving us all a sense of new hope and limitless possibilities. That's what this new covenant is all about.
That was Bill Clinton in his nomination speech back in 1992, Donnie. So my question is here, Hillary Clinton playing the national service card. She has a problem with millennial voters, a lot of young voters. This is who this is kind of directed at. Do you think this kind of proposal, harkening back to her husband's themes and also offering something, making a call to service to young people, will that have resonance politically in the final weeks of the campaign?
The next 38 days, you're going to see two tracks. You're going to see the female suburban track voter that you talked about, and clearly we know what's going on there. And you're going to see this millennial track. And what's ironic, and millennials have not turned on to, and I think they haven't because there was a great old ad campaign. Actually, it wasn't so great. It didn't work. It's not your father's Oldsmobile, because if everybody saw that as their parents' car, people see this as their parents' candidate, when in reality, she is more progressive even than her husband or any other Democratic platform. The fact that millennials, based on free tuition and based on the global warming issue alone, are not rushing out, it's stunning. And I think it's a pure perception thing. It's not your mother, it's your father's candidate. I think this is a step in the right direction because all know millennials are about giving back, world community. So I think you're going to see a big push in this direction.
Should Dad have an Oldsmobile?
Buick Electra 225.
I always liked my dad's Oldsmobile. That's why that ad campaign didn't work for me. I think, the millennial thing is a challenge for her. We've talked about it a lot on this show. I think things like this, explaining what she wants to do as president, tying it to some kind of themes and aspirations and putting her policies together in some kind of a narrative is all good. But the biggest problem she has with that group of voters still is going to be, this is still just talking about government in a way that feels like it's old hat. It still feels like status quo. It doesn't have the kind of revolutionary kind of fervor that Bernie Sanders had. And I think it's going to be hard for those voters to attract those kind of voters who are interested in that kind of message with this kind of program.
Before we go, can I say something to millennials? 3 words: free college tuition. What else do you need to know? I mean, seriously, millennials. Are you kidding me?
That was Donnie's voice. Well, you were looking at him. He was yelling. He was off camera, but he decided to take over the show anyway. Coming up, we will talk to a Donald Trump surrogate when we come back. us now is a Donald Trump supporter and the former lieutenant governor of New York State. That would be Betsy Mccoy. Betsy, great to see you.
Thank you.
We were just talking just now about Alicia Machado. I just want to ask you, as both a Trump supporter and a woman, like, in what universe?
I've been a woman all my life.
In what universe do you think it's helpful for Donald Trump to do what he did this morning and decide to attack?
I understand why his
again?
feelings are hurt by this controversy, because it seems like an ambush to me. The fact is, we know Donald Trump has a campaign manager, is a woman, a married woman with 4 little kids. He's offered enormous opportunities to women who work for him, and this just looks like a kind of dirty trick, a dirty campaign trick.
Right, but he called her Miss Piggy. He fat shamed her.
That wasn't confirmed.
And then he attacked her for being.
Don't say he called her Miss Piggy.
Then he attacked her for being overweight.
Let me just correct it for the record. There's no evidence that he called her Miss Piggy. Go ahead.
So then he attacked her on Tuesday morning, and then he attacked her again today.
Yeah. Well,
just try to answer my question. What political purpose do you think it serves for him to go and attack her again in the way he did today?
I think he's trying to set the record straight about what actually happened back then, which is far less relevant, of course, than what's happening now. But let me just say in one sentence what happened then, as far as I can see, which is that she was a beauty contestant, something Mrs. Clinton sticks her nose up at. It's not politically correct anymore, but back then it was. And she signed a contract that she would weigh a certain amount, kind of like a jockey riding on a horse in horse races has to weigh a certain amount, or a male model who has to fit into a suit of a certain size.
John, you know that.
And when you guys look pretty good, actually. Very good, in fact. But when she no longer fit that description, some people wanted to fire her, and he said no, give her another chance, let her work out, let her try to regain the job qualifications. That's as far as I know about Ms. Machado, and I have no intention of attacking her because, like all women, I've battled the bulge. My children have had many battles with weight. I have 2 granddaughters now, so I am a household of lots of women, and we all get it.
Betsy, first of all, the last thing you said is an outright lie that she was going to be fired and you saved her. They've talked to people who were at the organization at that time.
I can't address that.
Okay.
All I've heard is what I've been told, and it's a he said, she said thing from 20 years ago.
I want to go back to the last thing you said, because I've seen you around town, and you are a mom, and you have
and a grandmom now.
And a grandmom.
I have 3 daughters and 2 granddaughters.
You use the words. This is the man who's running for president of the United States, and this is a Latino woman who's in every person. And he called her disgusting.
I never heard that.
Oh, no, he tweeted it. We started the show. He referred to her as disgusting.
Well, now because of the attack, you mean?
No. All she said was that everything that's reported to be true. Yeah. She didn't say he's a horrible man. She said, I felt terrible because he fat shamed me.
Well, there's a lot of knife fighting going on.
Have you ever used, I've never called another human being disgusting. Well, I've said I dislike somebody.
I'm not sure whether you have or not.
No, that's not a word I attach to humans.
Let's put this in a little context, because I think
that's the context.
All the viewers, well, we all define context differently. Yeah. I think all the viewers, all the voters have a right to know really what's going on. And we were talking just before the show about where this accusation fit in the debate that we're all still reprocessing and assessing. And I was very disappointed in the debate. Not just because of the issue of Ms. Machado being raised, although I don't like to see women used that way, but also because the purpose of a debate is to inform voters, right? To shed light on things. And that debate didn't do that at all. There were no follow-up questions. I'll give you an example. Mrs. Clinton goes around the country and at the debate said she's going to make corporations pay their fair share. So why didn't the moderator say, well, what is the fair share, Mrs. Just a moment, let me finish. Why didn't the moderator say, well, Mrs. Clinton, what is the fair share? Corporations in the U.S. already pay the highest rates in the world. You're proposing hiking corporate tax rates, and the Federal Reserve has already warned us that if they are raised, it will cause, quote, a substantial decline in wages and growth. Right, so please explain that.
So, Betsy, I think that's Lester Holt seemed to have taken the approach that the 2 candidates were able to engage with each other on those questions.
Well, he didn't do that. He did a lot of nasty fact-checking on silly things with
Donald Trump could easily have raised that point if he wanted to. But I want to come back to the thing that's happened more recently, which is, what do you think about what happened in the debate? You're comfortable with the idea of having a person in the White House who is up at 3 o'clock in the morning, tweeting things about their political opponents.
Well, tweet
just let me finish the question. Under any circumstance, alleging that that there's a sex tape involved that does not exist, but that no one's been able to find.
I don't know whether it exists.
That news organizations have spent the week looking for have not found. You think that, temperamentally speaking, you're comfortable with that kind of person in the Oval Office?
Yes, I am.
You could think that would be okay behavior on the part of a president.
Don't bully me.
I'm not bullying you. I'm trying to get you to answer the question.
Yes, I am, but I know the answer you'd like me to give you.
No, I'm happy to have you answer you.
Let me explain that I think Donald Trump has a lot to offer this nation, and Mrs. Clinton is trying to change the debate from a debate over the economy. She doesn't want to own that because people are earning less than they did in 2007. She doesn't want to talk about foreign policy because ISIS is threatening so many parts of the world, and she left the State Department in a shambles. So what are we left with? She wants to redefine this debate as
Betsy,
political correctness, gender discrimination.
We have a hard break right now. Appreciate that point. Not really on the point of whether Donald Trump has a temperament to be president. But thank you for coming. Come back again.
Question.
We'll ask a pair of strategists about Donald Trump's week and more after this.
Welcome back. We're now joined by Democratic strategist Liz Smith, who has worked as Martin O'Malley's presidential campaign manager and as director of the rapid response for President Obama's campaign. And in Washington, D.C., Tim Miller, an ardent, never-Trump Republican and former communications director for Jeb Bush's presidential campaign. First, Liz, as a former Martin O'Malley person, who is your favorite world leader?
Merkel.
Okay.
I love her.
That's the party line, huh?
Look, I like Merkel. I like Trudeau. I love, you know what, Trudeau. Because, you know what, I'm
cool
a woman.
Cool dude.
He gets extra points for how good looking he is.
Give me May. She's a conservative woman. I'll go with May.
Okay, you got it, Tim. Liz, okay, let's wind back the clock 4 days ago and after the Machado moment. What would you walk into his bedroom after his first reaction? What was the way to handle that at that point? Just make it just nothing?
Donnie, did you just actually ask Liz Smith to imagine walking into Donald Trump's bedroom?
Well, I assume that's what happens afterwards. He's eating his Frostios, and they all come in the morning and tell him what's going on.
I just want to make this clear. I am never walking into that man's bedroom.
Me neither.
But,
can we take a vote on that? You too, John?
Right.
Okay.
Same.
If I were in the war room or if I were in the boardroom, what would I have told him to do? I would have said, look, I made some comments that I regret 20 years ago. They do not reflect who I am as a person. They do not reflect what I'm fighting for in this campaign. I would have told him to do not to do the exact opposite of what he did. And the thing about it is this: his initial comments were very bad, very offensive, but his response has been even worse.
Yeah, of course.
And it plays into his biggest weakness, this view that voters have that he is temperamentally unfit to be commander-in-chief.
So, Tim, let me ask you this question, right? There was a period of time that you were part of the Never Trump movement, and up until this debate, there was a definite consolidation happening in the Republican Party. A lot of people who had been Never Trump or had been uncomfortable with Trump were finally just saying, hey, you know what, we're not comfortable with him, but we don't want Hillary Clinton. He was starting to get close to 90% of Republican votes. What do you see happening on the basis of the debate and the fallout from the debate to the Republican level of support for Donald Trump?
Among elite Republicans in Washington, I hope we've seen the last of people getting on board who weren't on board before with Senator Cruz. Among regular rank-and-file Republicans, I fear that I thought that after the debate night that he hadn't lost any of them. I thought that he hadn't had a good night, but it wasn't so bad that he'd lost some of them. I think his behavior since the debate, if we were looking at the college-educated suburban women, this is the group that we had the most success with in the Never Trump ad campaign during the primary. I bet you peel off some of them because of his just grotesque behavior over the past few days.
And, we've also seen motivation. Like, we've seen searches for how to register to vote surge in Latino-heavy areas. So that's been a positive side effect for Democrats as well.
What would you worry about right now? The thing about the Clintons always is that, having watched them for a long time in politics, is that everything's always a cycle with them. When things are going great, it goes great for a while, and then something happens and that turns things around. They go off course.
Yeah.
What would you be worried about right now? If it's your job to worry about Hillary Clinton right now, what would you be worried about?
I would be worried that you let this sideshow get in the way of presenting a more affirmative, positive, aspirational message. Like, for instance, today, she announced a very bold national service plan. And you barely read about it because everyone's talking about Donald Trump's tweets. And what we've seen is that she really needs to motivate millennials. She needs to motivate Latino voters. She needs to motivate black voters. And to do that, she can't just run as not Donald Trump. She needs to offer up some big, bold ideas. So the thing I'd worry about is that they get back into this cycle of just attacking Donald Trump.
And that they get complacent.
Yeah, and yes, complacency too. And I think they go hand in hand.
Tim, you've been doing this for a long time, and during every campaign, there's kind of a moment in time where you feel the train leaving the tracks. To me, this week has felt that way, that the toothpaste is out of the tube, and it's going to be very difficult for Trump to put it back in the tube. Do you agree with that thesis?
I do. Honestly, I thought the train had left the tracks after the conventions. I think the last time I was on your show was around then, and I'd said that. It wasn't that Trump had a 0% chance to win at that time, but it was very bleak. And I think that basically he needed to run a very good campaign up until then. He needed to consolidate the Republican base, juice turnout among independents who hadn't been voting in the past, and keep Hillary's turnout down. And I think that, as Liz said, the only big question mark right now is, do the millennials, do African Americans, do Hispanics turn out in the numbers that they did for Obama? And if they do, there's literally no mathematical path for Trump to be the nominee. So, I think that's the big challenge for the Clinton campaign. And Trump, this week, I think, has receded a lot of the ground that he gained between the conventions and the first debate.
Tim, I'm going to stick with you about this question. You're apart from being defiantly against your party's nominee, you're otherwise a good Republican, staunch conservative.
True.
Tell me what you think. What's your assessment right now of Republican prospects to hold on to the Senate?
It'll be interesting to see what polls look like this week. What we were seeing is during Trump's lowest ebb following the controversy, that some Republican senators in their internal numbers were really hemorrhaging support, and it was going to be a big problem. As Trump started to narrow, I thought that odds as of last week, I think if the election had been last week, the Republicans keep the Senate. Right now I think it's a close toss-up. The battlegrounds are essentially Nevada, New Hampshire, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Missouri, and we need to take 3 of those. So I think that it's probably a toss-up, maybe a slight lean to the Democrats, but I've got a lot of faith in the good campaigns that are being run by Senate Republicans right now.
What say you to that? Down ballot.
Look, it's challenging, and this is why. You know, one way that I think Trump has kind of hurt Democrats down ballot is we've seen all the outside money, all the outside groups being poured into Senate races. In Ohio alone, Ted Strickland has had twice as much money spent against him in negative advertising than Hillary Clinton has nationally. And we're seeing the Koch brothers go state to state to state, destroying or trying to destroy Democratic candidates systematically. We've seen it with Strickland.
The evil Koch brothers?
Yeah, well,
I don't think the evil Koch brothers are going to be your problem.
The Koch brothers,
Tom Steyer is spending
NRA,
just as much money.
And we're seeing it in Indiana right now with Evan Bayh. And they think they dispatched Strickland in Ohio. I don't necessarily think they did. And they're now going to Indiana to do that. And it's hurting us. So it's going to be challenging. I'm optimistic, though.
Liz Smith, Tim Miller, you're both great. I'm really happy.
Thanks,
I love you, Tim.
Let's do this again when me and Liz can argue.
Yeah.
I didn't do anything to make Tim
Trump
feel really uncomfortable in this segment. I feel bad about that, but we'll get him next time. Coming up, lather, rinse, repeat. Our interview with Republican Party Chairman Reince Priebus is next. And if you're watching us in Washington, D.C., you can now listen to us on the radio at Bloomberg 99.1 FM. We'll be right back. The final days of this presidential race, 2 words could decide the next leader of the free world, and those words are ground game. So for The Circus, our Showtime documentary series in conjunction with Bloomberg Politics, which airs this Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern, I went to visit the Republican National Committee's headquarters in our nation's capital to see how the party is building its infrastructure in the major battleground states. We're here on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., out in front of the Republican National Committee. Always important in presidential election years, but it's particularly important this year because the Trump campaign is not financially close to being on par with Hillary Clinton's campaign. It's outsourced all of that to the Republican National Committee. Whether that will work or not, who knows? Romney Ryan, McCain Palin, Bush Cheney. It's like the wall of history. Bush Quayle, Reagan Bush. And now we have the wall of Priebus. Priebus, and Priebus. A lot of Priebus. Sir, I'm doing great. How are you? One of the unusual things, above many unusual things about this cycle, is that the Trump campaign doesn't really have a ground game and has basically outsourced it to you, and to your to your field operations, and if you go state by state?
Well, we've been doing this operation in a serious way after we lost in 2012 and realized that you couldn't have a national party that showed up 3 months before an election. So we've been on the ground now for basically 3 years. And from our standpoint, we think that the Hillary Clinton campaign is playing catch up to us, that this is our narrative that we own. And so we take it really personally when people start commenting about, well, you know, you have 24 offices here, but why don't you have 32? We have the biggest ground operation we've ever put together. Just on full-time paid staff, we're at over 1,100 paid on the ground. But when you add in something that we call the Republican Leadership Initiative, which is a 6-week trained program, where we have about 6,000 people that are working full-time, basically. In many cases, I hate to say it, sometimes they work harder than the paid staff. Sorry, guys. But
that's like you're going to start a mutiny. Everyone here is about to quit. They're going to walk out.
No. They know. I mean, the RLI team is incredible. So we have over 6,000 people doing that. Right. We've put a huge emphasis on knocking on doors. So one thing we learned in 2012 is that we were very centered around phone calls. Right. And the phones, the hit rate's not great. We were much better face-to-face, so we're breaking records, and we feel really good about where we're at.
What is it that makes you think your ground game is superior to the Clinton ground game that's built kind of on top of the Obama operation?
Yeah, I don't think they have the bleed through the Obama operation that Hillary. I mean, one thing that Obama did that we've tried to replicate is that, you know, everyone argues about, one good example, everyone wants to argue about offices. Well, they have 380 and you have 320. What Obama's operation showed us is that the offices are not where the action is. You know, hanging out in an office making phone calls. But what they were doing is they were meeting at Starbucks every morning at 8:30 with their neighborhood group, finding people in the neighborhood that are willing to work for you, that live there, work there, influence there. They wrote the standard there, and that's what we've been trying to replicate. We think we're bigger. We know we're bigger on the ground. We've been doing it for longer than they have.
Just talk about how much you guys are meshed with the Trump campaign now, and how well how all the coordination's working.
Yeah, well, I mean, as we sit here, our comms director is up in Trump Tower. My chief of staff right now is in Trump Tower. She's been gone all this week. Right. It is one operation at this point, and you know, the RNC and the Trump operation are working hand in glove, and you know, it is true. I mean, we do carry the load when it comes to the ground operation, but it's sort of just very fortunate that we took this initiative to grow at a time when we had a candidate that was a little bit thin, but it's working out.
Good morning, guys. Let's huddle up. All right, 47 days left. Let's go around with division leaders.
In Florida, we trained 3,000 people to knock doors this upcoming Saturday. Huge number.
I was in Indiana. It brings our total trainings to 470.
Over 4,000 volunteer prospects.
Trainings with Hispanic surrogates.
210 veteran volunteers.
We got a table set up to do voter registration.
642,000 doors already this week. Field team doing very well. Very proud of them.
Historically and traditionally, their ground operations are in-house.
Mr. Trump's campaign obviously has been very different. It's relied a lot on the rallies. I'll tell you what they do have. Yeah. They have an army of volunteers. Right. One of the biggest army of volunteers that I've ever seen, if not the biggest. So our challenge has been, you know, corral all the excitement and the volunteers that flock to all these rallies and train them and then activate them in the field. Right. Like right now, this is what we've been working towards, is the turnout.
Our thanks to Reince Priebus and our friends of the Republican National Committee. The circus airs this Sunday on Showtime at 8 p.m. Eastern. We will talk about how much ground games really matter this year after these words from our sponsors.
The polls that happened that night, the night of the debate, the snap polls, the ones that happened online, those all showed Mr. Trump winning in a huge way.
What scientific poll had Donald Trump winning? Give me one scientific poll. Everything else was those are fan polls, man.
Those are a snapshot of what people are thinking who are actually watching the debate.
Jason, you've been doing this a while. You know those are bogus.
I'll take the 7+ polls that all showed Mr. Trump winning big time. That's what we think is a much more accurate reflection of what happened on Monday night.
Well, he says you can't be a 10 if you're flat-chested. He hasn't said the equivalent of a man.
Well, I think everyone has their own opinion on what a 10 is.
So I think he's gotten very little credit, Megyn, for how gracious he was at the beginning and at the end of the debate. He said, you know, I came prepared to say some rough stuff, but I won't do it because your family's here and your daughter's here. But it's not nice that you're running hundreds of millions of dollars in negative ads against me.
Kellyanne.
And he has a point.
Come on. It's not nice. They are running for president. Of course she's going to hit him with negative ads.
But the ad should be true.
He's out there on the ads that she's running about him when it comes to his comments on women use his words, Kellyanne.
Those are some Trump surrogates tangling with journalists on live TV. We're joined now by two of D.C.'s finest, Washington editor for the National Review, Ileana Johnson, and national political correspondent for Washington Post, Phil Rucker. Phil, we got to see some greatest hits. We've been talking about that all show. I want to shift at what we teased out of the last segment on the ground game. I'm sorry, excuse me. This is for Ileana. I was dumb. Ileana, let me shift to you. I know you work on a piece on the ground game in the Republicans. I remember hearing David Plouffe say that 2012 they knew where every single vote was. Is it fair to say the Republicans are at a tremendous deficit, despite the fact of what Reince Priebus was saying?
Absolutely, and you know, credit goes to the RNC that's had to fill in a huge vacuum where the Trump campaign doing the work that the Trump campaign should be doing. So they've come in and they're doing a lot of hard work. But, you know, take Florida, where they're operating at about a fifth the capacity of the Clinton campaign. They've got about 80 people down there. Clinton campaign has about 500. But look, Trump is about 1 point behind in the latest polls of Florida. And I think it really leads to the question, how much does ground game actually matter? Because Trump is running, he's really not getting crushed. And I think the conclusion that one can draw is that, you know, ground game is about harvesting supporters that already exist. It's not about finding new supporters who are out there. And Trump has a lot of supporters, but the conclusion is he's not really building new, he's not, you know, creating new supporters in the campaigning that he's doing. That's what the rest of the campaign is about, and I think at the end of the day, that's going to be Trump's problem.
Phil, I want to ask you about a question that I sort of asked Tim Miller a little while ago on this show, which is, there was coming into this debate, the polls were tightening, and Republicans were consolidating around Trump. Given his debate performance and more pointedly his performance since the debate, what are you hearing and seeing from Republicans about Donald Trump?
Yeah, so I've actually spent the day with my colleague talking to a lot of Republican strategists and operatives and lawmakers and other party officials, and there's a great deal of concern. There's sort of mounting anxiety that Trump is kind of letting it go, that it wasn't just a rocky debate performance Monday, but it's a week now where he's been attacking this Latina beauty queen, and he's had sort of erratic behavior, including the tweets overnight, and a sense that he's not focused and disciplined and can't concentrate on what a lot of Republicans see as the most effective message for him, which is that he's a change agent and that Hillary Clinton has bad judgment. We're not hearing that. We're hearing his attacks about the beauty queen, for example. And so there's a real desire for him to change urgently. And it's important because there aren't 40 days left till people start voting. They're already voting in Iowa, for example, and other states are going to start early voting here soon. So the time is really precious.
Ileana, sort of the same question to you. Back right after the Democratic convention, when Trump went after the Khan family, I'd say the Republican freak out was kind of at Godzilla level on a scale of 1 to Godzilla. And then it kind of subsided for the last month, partly because the polls tightened, as I said. What level do you feel that again, on a scale of 1 to Godzilla, what's the level of Republican freak out on this Friday evening?
I think it's at about 60% of the con level, because this Miss Universe contestant isn't exactly the unimpeachable sort of citizens that the cons were. But I think it really does. I think this really does show that, you know, Trump is exhibiting the sort of political instinct. He's the only candidate who could turn a losing 90-minute debate performance into a 4-day-long national event, and that's what's really concerning here. I don't think it's his attacks on this Miss Universe contestant who's not a model citizen, but it's really the horrible political instincts that he's been displaying, and I think it's unlikely that he'll have better instincts on display in the next 2 debate performances, which is really the concern.
Phil, in talking to the Republican operatives, clearly I think that the 2 best moments for Trump and the 2 big talking points are, Hillary, you've been doing this for 30 years, and of course, trade, trade, trade. It's a pretty simple 1-2 punch. Is that the consensus within the Republican folks that you're talking to?
It is, but there are other things that he could be doing too. There's a sense that there were a lot of missed opportunities in that first debate. He never really went after her on the Clinton Foundation, for example. The comments about the email, her email scandal, were pretty brief.
Wouldn't it be tough right now, given particularly the latest events now in terms of with Cuba and all his foundation things? Isn't that kind of a weak punch at this point to be focusing on her foundation?
Oh, certainly. But a lot of Republicans want to see him sort of doing everything he can to make that case against Hillary Clinton, not getting distracted by these old grudges, these sort of personal issues, counterpunching every time he gets hit by something coming in from the side. And they just want to see their nominee focused and executing every day, and he's failing to do that right now.
Eliana, wouldn't you think, you mentioned the fact that this behavior has kind of if you look forward to the next debate, it makes you kind of wonder about whether Trump's going to be able to pull it together. Everyone in his world thinks he must do better in the second debate, and that will require a certain kind of work and focus and discipline. Just seeing this behavior, particularly the behavior of the 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m. tweets, what conclusions would one draw if one worked in the Trump campaign about what that means for what the next 2 weeks hold for Donald Trump?
You know, I think the real concern is that he could be the best prepared candidate or the best prepared person in the world, but he walks on that debate stage, and if he's baited, all that preparation goes out the window. And I think he did walk on the debate stage. You know, he was moderately prepared. He did get out a couple of effective answers. He arguably won the first 20 minutes, but he cannot resist taking the bait. He's incredibly thin-skinned, and he gets into, you know, he follows every rabbit down the hole, and that's the real concern, his lack of self-discipline.
We'll be watching the rabbits in the holes a week from Sunday. Eliana Johnson, Phil Rucker, thank you. You are both great, and we will be right back.
So, Donnie, this weekend, if I am up late and I see a tweet from you at 3:10 a.m., what should I conclude about your state of mind?
You should hope I'm nowhere near a nuclear weapon, and I'm probably on my 6th martini at that point.
Okay, that's fine. It's good to hear. I'd like to know that Donnie's at least honest about his state of mind. Head to BloombergPolitics.com right now for our look at why Congress is kinda regretting that 9/11 Saudi bill override. On Tuesday, we'll have special pregame and postgame coverage of the vice presidential debate in Virginia. You can watch it on Bloomberg TV and on Twitter. The Twitter, our exclusive partner for debate coverage. From me and Donnie here, have a great weekend and sayonara.
I'm Mark Crumpton. You're watching Bloomberg West. Let's begin with a check of your first word news. A woman whose husband was killed at the Pentagon on 9/11 is suing Saudi Arabia. The lawsuit comes 2 days after Congress enacted legislation allowing the filing of such cases against foreign governments, overriding a veto by President Obama. Saudi Arabia denies any connection to 9/11. Texas has formally stopped providing aid and services to refugees. Governor Greg Abbott says federal authorities have failed to meet the state's demands for stricter refugee vetting. Kansas and New Jersey have also withdrawn from the resettlement program. Federal investigators have questioned the engineer of a New Jersey transit train that crashed in Hoboken Thursday, leaving one person dead and over 100 others injured. Investigators also say they recovered the event recorder, which could indicate how fast the train was going as it entered the terminal. The NTSB says the investigation could take up to 10 days. On Sunday, voters in Colombia are expected to approve a peace plan that ends a 52-year war with FARC rebels. The agreement calls for the rebels to hand over their weapons to the United Nations. In return, they're guaranteed seats in the Colombian Congress and are eligible for reduced punishment for crimes. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,600 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton in New York. Bloomberg West is next.